हेलो एवरीवन, वेरी गुड मॉर्निंग ऑल ऑफ यू। इस वीडियो में डिस्कस करेंगे रिमेनिंग क्वेश्चन जो लास्ट चैप्टर हम डिस्कस कर रहे हैं क्लास 12 का थीम थर्ड। यहाँ तक हमने देख लिया था जो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के रिगार्डिंग हम प्रोविजन देख रहे थे एंड द विल ऑफ पीपल के बारे में बात करें तो कम्युनिस्ट मेंबर थे एक सोमनाथ लहरी। इन्होंने सो द डार्क हैंड ऑफ ब्रिटिश इंपेरियलिज्म हैंगिंग ऑफ द डेलिब्रेशन ऑफ द कॉन्स्टिट्यूंट असेंबली। इन्होंने बोला कि he thus argued the member that Indians in general to fully free themselves from the influence of imperial rule कि जो ब्रिटिशर्स थे उनकी पॉलिसी हम क्यों अडॉप्ट करें। इन द विंटर 1946 से 7 के बीच में असेंबली डेलिब्रेट द ब्रिटिश वर स्टिल इन इंडिया एंड एंट्रीम एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन हेडेड बाय जवाहरलाल नेहरू, तो ये आपसे पूछ लेता है, was in place but it could only operate under the direction of the viceroy and British government in London. Then Lahiri exhorted his colleagues to realize that the Constituent Assembly was British made and he was working the British plans and British should like it to be worked out. एंड ये आपकी मेंबर ऑफ इंटरिम गवर्नमेंट थी। दिस इज वेरी गुड सर, बोल्ड वर्ड्स, नोबल वर्ड्स। सोमनाथ लहरी ने ये कुछ बोला था, वेल सर आई मस्ट कंग्रेचुलेट पंडित नेहरू टू फाइन एक्सप्रेशन टू he gave the spirit of Indian people when he said that is no imposition from British will be accepted by the Indian people. Imposition would be represented and objected, he said, and added that if need we will work well your struggles. That is very good sir, bold words, noble words. But the point is to see that how you are going to apply that challenge. Well sir, the point is imposition is here right now. Not only the British plans made by any future constitution dependent on its treaty satisfactory to the Britishers, but suggest that for every little difference, you will have to run for the federal court and dance attendance there in England and call on the British Prime Minister Clement Attlee जो थे or someone else. Not only it is fact that Constituent Assembly whatever plans we may be have, I think we are under the shadow of British guns, British Army, their economic and financial strength and stranglehold, which means that final जो power थी still handing the question of power has not been finally decided, which means the future is completely in our hand. मतलब उनका ये कंसर्न था कि कहीं ब्रिटिशर्स कंट्रोल ना करें. Not only that, but the statement made by that Lee and others recently have made it clear that if it need अगर आवश्यकता पड़ी they will even threaten you division entirely, and this means that there is no freedom in this country. As Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel put some days ago, we have freedom only to fight among ourselves. This is only freedom we got. Therefore, our humble questions and suggestion is that not a question of getting something by working out this plan, but to declare independence here and now, call upon the interim government and call upon the people of India to stop fratricidal warfare को बंद कीजिए, look out against its enemy, and we still has the whip hand, that is British imperialism, and go together to fight it and then resolve our claims. Afterward, we will be free. ये एडविन एंड मोंटेगू was the author of Montego Chelmsford Reform 1990 की बात की गई है. नेहरू admit that most nationalist leaders जो थे had wanted a different kind of constituent assembly. It was also true in sense that British government had a hand in its birth and it had attached certain conditions within the assembly had to function. But emphasized Nehru, you must not ignore the source from which the assembly derives its strength. Nehru added, government do not come into being by state papers. Government are in fact the expression of will of the people. We have met here today because of the strength of the people behind us, and we shall go for the people, not for any party or group, but the people as a whole. Shall wish to go, we should therefore always keep in mind the passion that lie in the heart of the masses of the Indian people and try to fulfill them. उसके बाद the Constituent Assembly was expected to express the aspiration of those who had participated in the movement for independence. Democracy, equality, justice were ideals that had become intimately आपके associate थे social struggle of India के साथ. Since the 19th century में when social reformer in 19th century opposed the child marriage and demanded that widow will be allowed to remarry. They were pleading for social justice. वो social justice की बात कर रहे थे जहाँ पे स्वामी विवेकानंद ने कैंपेन चलाया था रिफॉर्म ऑफ हिंदुइज्म के कंटेक्स्ट में. वो चाहते थे कि रिलीजियस रिलीजन जो है बिकम ए मोर जस्ट, एंड वे ज्योतिबा फुले जो कि महाराष्ट्र में थे इन्होंने डिप्रेस्ड क्लास, कम्युनिस्ट एंड सोशलिस्ट, ऑर्गेनाइज वर्कर एंड पीजेंट के लिए बहुत अच्छा वो किया था. देन दे वर डिमांडिंग इकोनॉमिक एंड सोशल जस्टिस. उसके बाद द नेशनल मूवमेंट अगेन against a government that seemed an oppressive and illegitimate was inevitably a struggle for democracy and injustice, for citizens' right and their equality. In fact, as the demand for representation grew, the British had been forced to introduce a series of constitutional reforms. A number of acts were passed, जैसे 1919, 1909 को 35 को, gradually enlarging the space for Indian participation in provincial government. The executive was made partially responsible for the provincial legislature in 1919 and almost entirely, that is Government of India Act 1935. When elections were held in 1937 under 35 Act, the Congress came into power 8 out of 11 provinces. Yet, we should not be unbroken continuity between the earlier constitution development and what happened in the 3 years from 1946. While the earlier constitutional experiment जो थे were in response in growing demand for representative government के काश हमको ऐसी चीजें मिली थी जैसे 1919 का 09 का और ये सब were not directly debated and formulated by the Indians. They were enacted by the colonial government and the electorate that are elect in that provincial bodies had expanded over the year. But even in 1935, it remained limited to 10 to 15% of the adult population, and there was no universal adult franchise. Then the legislature elected under 1935 operated within the framework of colonial rule के अंदर वो काम कर रहे थे and were responsible किसके थे? Governor appointed by the British. Then vision that Nehru was trying to outline in 1946 का जो resolution था उसके context में that India अब क्या बन चुका है? Independence, sovereign republic country. उसके बाद डिफाइनिंग राइट्स को हम कैसे बताएंगे? जैसे आज हमारे पास फंडामेंटल राइट है आर्टिकल 12 से लेकर 35 तक, तो वहां पे हमने क्या कुछ बताने की कोशिश की थी. हियर आर द राइट ऑफ इंडिविजुअल सिटीजन टू बी डिफाइंड. वर द ओप्रेस्ड ग्रुप टू हैव एन स्पेशल राइट, क्या उनके लिए कोई राइट था? व्हाट वाज द व्हाट वाज अबाउट माइनॉरिटीज हु इन फैक्ट कुड बी डिफाइंड एज ए माइनॉरिटी. माइनॉरिटी कौन है, ये कैसे डिफाइन किया? एज द डिबेट ऑन द फ्लोर ऑफ कॉन्स्टिट्यूंट असेंबली एंड होल्ड इट. इट वाज क्लियर दैट देयर वर नो कलेक्टिव शेयर्ड आंसर. कोई एक आंसर इसका हम नहीं बोल सकते to any of these questions. The answer would evolve through the clash of opinion and drama of individual encounter. तो अलग अलग डिबेट्स की वजह से ये क्वेश्चन निकले हैं एंड इस टाइप के प्रोविजन. इन his inaugural speech, Nehru had invoked the will of people and declared that the makers of the constitution had to fulfill the passion that lie in the heart of masses. And this was no easy task. With the anticipation of independence, different groups expressed their will in different ways and made different demands. These would have been debated and conflicting ideas that would be reconciled before a consensus and could be forget. अब देखते हैं द प्रॉब्लम इज सेपरेट इलेक्टोरेट. 26 ऑफ अगस्त 1947 बी पोकर बहादुर फ्रॉम मद्रास मेड ए पावरफुल प्ली. इन्होंने लगाई थी कि याचिका फॉर कंटिन्यूइंग द सेपरेट इलेक्टोरेट कि जो मुस्लिम के कंटेक्स्ट में मुस्लिम वोट डाल सकते हैं उस टाइप के प्रोविजन को आप कंटिन्यू रखिए. मतलब माइनॉरिटी अपने लीडर खुद सिलेक्ट करें. माइनॉरिटी एग्जिस्ट इन ऑल लैंड्स आर्ग्यूड बहादुर. दे कुड नॉट बी विस्ड अवे and they could not be erased out of the existence. The need was to create political framework in such minorities could live in harmony with the others and the difference between the communities would be minimized. This was possible तभी आपका ठीक हो सकेगा if minority were represent with the political system. उनकी वॉइस जब सुनी जाएंगी and their views can be taken into account. Only separate electorate would ensure the Muslim had a meaningful voice in governments in the country. The need of Muslim बहादुर लहर could not be properly understood by non-Muslims. कि जो मुस्लिम है वही उनके सोल रिप्रेजेंटेटिव हैं. Nor could be true, लेकिन ये सच नहीं था that representative Muslim be chosen by the people who did not belong to that community. उसके बाद the demand for separate electorate provoked anger and dismay among the most nationalists. In the passionate debate that followed, a range of arguments were offered against the demand. Most nationalists saw separate electorate as a measure deliberately introduced by British to divide the people. तो उन्होंने बताया कि ये सब तो अंग्रेजों ने किया था हम लोगों को तोड़ने के लिए. The English played their game under the cover of safeguard, जिसमें आरवी दौलकर told the Bahad that with the help of it they adored minorities को to long go. give it up now, and there is no one to misguide you. Partition had made nationalists fervently opposed to the idea of separate electorate, and they are haunted by the fear of continued civil war, riots, and violence. Separate electorate was poison that has entered in the body politic of our country. Declare Sardar Patel. इस टाइप की बात यहाँ पर कोट कर सकते हो. It was demand that had turned our one community against another, divide the nation, cause bloodshed, and led to tragic आपका partition हो जाए country के अंदर. Do you want peace in the land? और आप इसको कैसे करना चाहते हैं? इवेंट की पिक्चर है 1946 में इंडियन लीडर्स लंदन में गए थे. The British elephant is gone, but they have left the mischief behind. देखते हैं सरदार वल्लभ भाई पटेल ने यहाँ पे क्या कहा है. It is no use saying that if we ask for separate electorate की अगर आप बात करते हो, because it is good for us कि अब हमारे लिए अच्छा है. We have heard it long enough. We have heard it for years. हमने बहुत देख लिया ये सब. As a result of this agitation बहुत सारे हुए हैं separate nation के लिए. Can you show one free country where जहाँ पे कोई separate electorate हो? If so, I shall be prepared to accept. अगर एक भी ऐसा हुआ तो मैं यहाँ पे भी adopt कर दूंगा. But in this unfortunate country, this if this separate electorate is going to persist in even after the division of the country, war beated the country. It is not worthy and living in. Therefore, I say it is not good for my good alone. It is not for my good alone, and it is for our good, your own good. That, and I say, forget the past. One day we may be united. The British element is gone. वो जा चुके हैं, but they have left the mishap behind. We do not want to perpetuate the mishap. When the British introduced this element, they had to expected that they will have to go soon. They wanted that easy administration. This was right, but they have left the legacy behind. Are you get out or not? उसके बाद काउंटरिंग द डिमांड फॉर सेपरेट इलेक्टोरेट, गोविंद वल्लभ पंत जो थे उन्होंने बोला इट वाज नॉट ओनली द हार्मफुल फॉर नेशन बट आल्सो फॉर द माइनॉरिटीज के लिए भी खतरनाक है. ही एग्रीड दैट बहादुर the success of democracy was judged by the confidence it generated among different sections of people. He agreed to that every citizen in free state should be treated in manner of that satisfied not only the material one but also the spiritual sense of self-respect. And that majority community जो है had obligation है उनके ऊपर to try and understand the problem of minority कि minority की problems को लोग समझे and emphasize with their inspiration. Yet Govind Pallappan ने opposed the idea of separate electorate, and it was suicidal demand है. He argued that permanently isolate the minorities, make them vulnerable. अगर आप उनको बिल्कुल isolate कर दो separate electorate से, तो वो बिल्कुल vulnerable हो जाएगी and deprive them of any effective say within the government. I believe that separate electorate will be suicidal the minorities. तो हमने ये बात की थी यहाँ पे exit. Behind all these arguments was concerned with the making of unified nation state. In order to build political unity and forge a nation, every individual had a molded into citizen of the state. Each group had to be assimilated within the nation. The constitution would grant the citizens right, but the citizen had to offer the loyalty to state. Communities could be recognized as cultural entities and assured cultural rights को मिलेंगे. But politically, however, members of all communities had to act equal member for one state. Else, there would be divided loyalties. There is the unwholesome and some extent degrading habit of thinking always in terms of communities and never in terms of citizen, said Bhatt. And he added that let us see, remember that citizen that must count. It is citizen that form the base as well as summit of the social pyramid. Even as the importance of community rights were being recognized, and there was a lurking fear among many nationalists that is led to divide the loyalties and make it difficult to forge strong nation and strong state. Not all Muslims supported the demand for separate electorate. जैसे बेगम याजस रसूल, for instance, felt that separate electorate were self-destructive अपने आप में, since they isolate the minority from majority, and by 49 में most Muslim members of the Constituent Assembly were agreed कि separate electorate इनके interest के against में है, and instead of Muslim needed to take an active part in democratic process में आना पड़ेगा to ensure that they are decisive voice of the political system. तो अपने आप को minority पहले तो समझो. There cannot be any divide royal. Govind Vallabh Pant argued that in order to become loyal citizen, people had to stop focusing only on the community and the self. कि अपने आप पे ही focus मत करो, पूरी community को लेके चलो. For the success of democracy, one must train himself in the art of self-discipline होना चाहिए. In democracy, we should care for himself and care for others. There cannot be divide loyalties. All loyalties must exclusively be centered around the state. And if in a democracy you are create rival loyalties, or you create a system in which any individual or group, instead of suppressing his extravagance, cares not for larger or interest than democracy, is doomed. Democracy खत्म हो जाएगा. उसके बाद we will need much more than the resolution. While welcoming the objective resolution, NG Ranga, एक socialist थे, who had been the leader of peasant movement, argue क्या था उन्होंने, the term minority that interpreted in the economic terms. The real minorities for Ranga were the poor and downtrodden. He welcomed that legal rights जो है वो constitution was granting to each individual but pointed out its limit. In this opinion, it was meaningless for the poor people in the village to know that they are now had the fundamental rights to live and have the full employment, or that they could have their meeting, their conference, their association and various other civil liberties. It was essential to create conditions where these constitutional enriched rights could be effectively enjoyed, and for this they needed protection. They need crops, they need the ladder and run. उसके बाद the real minorities are the masses of the country. Welcoming the objective resolution introduced by Jawaharlal Nehru, क्या कहता, there is lot of talk about minorities. Who are real minorities? कौन है? Not Hindu in the so-called Pakistan province, not the Sikh, not even the Muslim. No, the real minorities are the masses इस country में हैं. These people are depressed हैं, ये लोग oppressed हैं, suppressed till now. They are not able to take advantage of the ordinary civil right. तो इन्होंने बताया कि minority वो हैं जो अपने rights का advantage नहीं ले सकती. What is the position? You go to the tribal areas. According to the law, their own traditional, their tribal laws, their land cannot be alienated. Yet our merchant go there and so-called free market, they are able to snatch their land. Thus, even though the law goes against the snatching away of their land, still the merchant are able to turn the tribal people into variable slaves by various kind of bonds and make them heritably bond slaves. Let us go to the ordinary villagers. There goes to the money lender with his money, and he is able to get the villagers in his pocket. And there is a landlord himself, zamindar, and the malguzar. ये word याद रखना है, आ सकता है. And there are various other people who are able to exploit these poor peoples, and there is no elementary education even among these peoples, and the real minorities that need protection and assurance of protection जिनकी आवश्यकता है वो real minority है. In order to give the necessary protection, we need to much more than resolution. And Ranga also drew attention to the gulf that separated the broad masses of Indian and those claiming to speak on their behalf of Constituent Assembly, whom we are supposed to represent, the ordinary masses of our country, and yet almost of us do not belong the masses themselves. We are of them. We wish to stand up for them, but the masses are not able to come up with the Constituent Assembly. But बहुत सारे masses तो इसमें अंदर है ही नहीं, मतलब जो representation है वो अलग टाइप की है. It may take our some time. Meanwhile, we are here as their trustees, as their champions. We are trying to best speak up for them. कि हम जितना best उनके लिए कर सकें वो ही हमारे कम, वो भी हमारे लिए कम. One of the group mentioned by Ranga, the tribals, had among the representative of the assembly the gifted orator Jayapal Singh. In welcoming the objective resolution, उन्होंने क्या बोला था? As an Adivasi, I am not expected to understand the legal intricacies of the resolution. कि मैं ज़्यादा legality तो समझ नहीं पा रहा, but my common sense that every one of us should march in that road to freedom and fight together. Sir, if there is any group of Indian people that has been heavily treated in my, it is my people. They have been disgracefully treated, the neglected for the 6,000 year. The whole history of my people is one of the constitution, one of the continuous exploitation and dispossession by the known aboriginal for India, punctuated by the rebellions and disorder. And I take Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru at his word. I take you all at your own word that now we are going to start a new chapter of independence India, and where there are equality of opportunity, where no one would be neglected, जहाँ पे कोई भी neglected ना हो. Singh ने spoke eloquently on the need to protect the tribes and ensure the condition that could help them come up to the level of general population. Tribes were not numerical minorities, he argued, but they needed protection. They had been dispossessed of the land they had settled. जहाँ पे वो settle हुए थे उससे उनको dislocate कर दिया, deprived of their forest, pasture and forced to move in search of new homes. Receiving them a primitive and backward, the rest of the society had turned away from the splendid them. He had made a plea for breaking the emotional and physical distance that separate the tribal from the rest of society. Our point is that you have to mix with us. Be willing to mix with you. Singh was not asking for separate electorate, but he felt that reservation of seats would be essential to represent themselves. It would be a way, he said, for compelling others to hear the voice of tribals and come near them. उसके बाद we are suppressed for thousands of years. How the rights of depressed class to be defined by the constitution. During the national movement, Ambedkar has demanded separate electorate for the depressed class, and Mahatma Gandhi has opposed it, arguing that this would permanently separate from the rest of the society. How could the Constituent Assembly resolve the opposition? And what kind of protection there will be for depressed class? And we want removal of our social disabilities. यहाँ पे दक्षिणी वल्लभ from the Madras. What we want is not the old kind of safeguard, it is moral safeguard which give the protection to the undergoes of the countries. And I refuse to believe that 70 million Harijans are now considered as a minority. What we want is the immediate removal of our social disabilities. उसके बाद some members of the depressed class emphasize that problem of the untouchables could not be resolved through the protection and safeguard alone. ऐसे safeguard बनाने से कुछ नहीं होगा. Their disabilities जो है are caused by social norms की वजह से है, and कुछ moral value upper caste की ऐसी है. Society had to use their service and labor but kept them a social distance, refusing to mix with them, dine with them, and allow them into temple. Temple में entry नहीं दे रहे. We have been suffering that, but we are prepared to suffer no more, said J. Nagappa from Madras. We have realized our responsibilities हमें समझ आ चुकी है, and we know how to assert ourselves. Then Nagappa pointed out that numerically the depressed class were not a minority. They formed between the 20 to 25% of the total population. Their suffering was due to their systematic marginalization, not their numerical insignificance. And they had no access to education, no share to administration. Addressing the assembly, KG Khanderkar ने क्या कहा था? Central provinces. We were suppressed for thousands of years, suppressed to such extent that neither our minds nor our bodies, and now even our heart work, nor we are able to march forward. This is the position. ये आपकी बात की गई है. एंड वी हैव नेवर आस्क फॉर प्रिविलेज. हंसा मेहता ऑफ बॉम्बे, इन्होंने बताया था कि डिमांड जस्टिस फॉर द वुमेन, नॉट रिजर्व सीट, नॉट सेपरेट इलेक्टोरेट. वी हैव बीन नेवर आस्क फॉर द प्रिविलेज, हमने कोई अलग प्रिविलेज आपसे नहीं मांगी. व्हाट वी हैव आस्क फॉर द सोशल जस्टिस, इकोनॉमिक जस्टिस एंड पॉलिटिकल जस्टिस. वी हैव आस्क फॉर द इक्वालिटी which alone can be the basis for mutual respect and understanding, without which the real cooperation जो है not possible between the man and woman. And after the partition violence, Ambedkar to no longer argued for separate electorate. बाद में तो इन्होंने separate electorate की बात बंद कर दी थी. The Constituent Assembly finally recommend किया था that untouchability is abolished. Article 17 के according. Fine, Hindu temples सबके लिए खुले हैं. सीट लेजिस्लेचर में और जॉब्स में इनके लिए रिजर्वेशन है. Many recognize that this could not the solve problems. Social discrimination का क्या? Could not be erased only through the constitutional legislation. There had to be change in attitude within the society. But the measures are welcomed by democratic public. लेकिन ये वाले भी ठीक ठाक है. इसके बाद the power of state की बात करें, तो इसको हम I think चैप्टर बोल रहा हूँ, पार्ट नंबर 3 में डिस्कस करेंगे. एंड उसके साथ इसको आराम से फिनिश कर दें, फिर आपकी हिस्ट्री कंप्लीट हो जाएगी. सो आज के लिए इतना ही. वी विल मीट इन द नेक्स्ट क्लास. थैंक यू. नेक्स्ट डे.